Okay, good afternoon. My name is Neil Christian here at Genesis Innovation Academy, and I'm going to actually discuss my Metro Risa iLEAD short-term data analysis project. So before we start, I want to talk about the overview and kind of give you what we're looking at. We're looking at the school demographics. We're going to look at some data analysis. And we're also going to look at the school processes and how we're going to target our long-term project based on what we saw in our data analysis for the short term. So first, looking at some of the demographics, we have 277 total students. We have, as you can see, the number of students per grade, but this particular data analysis is using the Georgia Milestones Assessment System results from 2017-2018, so we're going to be concentrating on grades 3 through 6. The 7th graders, as you can see, they were 6th graders last year, and we added that new grade, so we didn't have 7th graders last year. So therefore, we're looking at grades 3 through 6 when we look at the data analysis piece. Some more demographics. It is all boys academy, so it's 100% male. We have 92.4% African American, 6.9% Hispanic, and 0.7% white students. We have 63% free and reduced that participate in the free and reduced lunch program. We have 7.2% that participates in the special education program, and that includes not only the students with individualized education plans, but also the 504 students. And we have 6.1% that participate in the talented and gifted program. So, the whole purpose of this short-term data analysis is to look at the Georgia Milestones Assessment System results from the math for grades 3 through 6 in 2017-2018. So, look at grade 3 first. So, grade 3, we can see that have ELA on here as well, but we're looking at the specifically the math scores. So, we had a quarter of our students that received a level 1 in the beginning, which is very high. We have 38% in developing, so 31% in proficient and 6% in distinguished. Now, with regards to the CCRPI score, we get a half a point for every student that's in the developing, a full point for a student in proficient, and 1.5 points for students in distinguished. But with regards to actually passing the assessment, it's proficient and above. So although we get a half a point for those developing students, they still didn't quite pass. So we're looking at 63%, and I'll summarize that on another slide, but we're looking at 63% that did not pass that Georgia Milestones. For grade 4, similar, but now it's even higher because we're looking at 77% of our students were not proficient on that Georgia Milestones in mathematics, which causes an alarm for a problem. Now, we do have a couple that are in distinguished. It was slightly higher than 3rd grade, but for the most part, we only have 23% of our 4th grade students that actually achieve proficiency or greater on that Georgia Milestones. 5th grade, again, we're looking at now only 34% that receive proficiency or greater on the math milestones, and then, of course, the 66% at beginning or developing. So those level 1s and level 2s is what my long-term project, of course, it will target everyone, but we want to move those students to proficiency or distinguished. And last, grade 6, we're looking at 72% of our students were beginning or developing. As you notice, we had a higher percentage in the distinguished category. That's because that's our highest grade that we have the most number of talented and gifted students. So we need to move those. So we had 28% that achieved proficiency or better on the grade 6 milestones. So to summarize it, I want to show it again. This is what we talked about. 69, let's skip the language arts. 75% of grade 3 students perform at or above the developing level. Again, developing and above gets us points on CCRPI, so we do like that 75%, but we want to make sure we achieve greater in the proficiency and distinguished range. And 65% of grade 4 students perform at or above the developing learner in mathematics. For grade 5, we had 72% to perform at or above in the developing range, and for 6th grade it was 75%. But again, this is where we actually need to increase our number of students, our percentage in math across the proficient and distinguished range. The next slide, of course, we don't have to worry about the top 2 bullets, but grade 5 is a grade that you get to the opportunity to retake that assessment in mathematics, only grade 5 that we have now. And when we got the scores back, we only had 9 days based on our calendar to do the retake, and we ended up getting 56% of those students to increase their scale score on that Georgia mathematics retake. Now, if we can do that in 8 days, if we can do what we're going to do, and we're going to discuss that in the on the next slides about what are we going to do to increase those scores, in 8 days we can do it across the whole year. So our school processes. I said to ensure students retain the knowledge of the previously taught standards from the Georgia Standards of Excellence, our framework, we will spiral the concepts in a 10-day cycle, which leads to my next steps. So for grades 3 through 7, we looked at those Georgia Milestones Assessment System test blueprints, and we looked at those priority standards, which what I call the high impact target standards. And we figured if we spiral those old standards in throughout the year on a 10-day cycle, we'll be able to actually go back and revisit and reteach and reassess, and so students can retain that knowledge. So that leads into my long-term project. That data analysis told us that we need to be thinking about ways that we can make sure students retain all of the information that they're receiving throughout the year. Because let's not forget, they take the test in May. We are late April, early May. We start teaching in August, so we got to make sure they actually retain those concepts. So, which leads us to the spiraling concept. So of course, it allows us to teach it, but it works for all learners. It works for all learners, as we can see on here. It talks about the struggling learners. The first time a teacher may introduce a concept or a standard, they realize that the students had a gap. Well, the next time around when we spiral it, we can actually provide those interventions for the students so that they can capture that information and learn it. And even for the high potential students, we can take, if they've mastered a standard, well, can they actually apply it to a complex, rigorous task, and that will help out with that retention as well. So these short cycle assessments, now we're going to get into how will it look. This is something the teachers do not have to create all the items, the problems, the pre-assessment, the problems per day, and the PowerPoint has been created for the teachers. So it's a 10-day process. So on day 1, the students will take this 5-question pre-assessment, and they're not going to they'll get their score, but they're not going to get to go over the items because they're going to take that same pre as a post, and we're going to compare to see the growth. But days 2 through 9, those are 8 days. They're going to work on one problem a day that's based on that standard, and we'll take a look at one on the next slides. So what we're going to do here with the teachers is make sure we spiral in those high impact target standards, and we're going to capture the pre and post after we do our 10-day cycle for those high impact target standards. And also the analysis is already on a spreadsheet, and this is going to be very interesting. We're going to put the students' names here. We're going to put what they got on the milestones in the previous year if they had one. If they did not have one, if they came from a homeschool or private school, what we're going to do is put in their most recent MAP score that we use to get a benchmark in the beginning of the year. It will still tell us whether they're beginning, developing, proficient, or distinguished. And as you can see, we have all the different skills, and we'll look into that a little bit later. But the teachers will put in the pre-test score and the post-test score for those students. Now, what will that do? There's another spreadsheet that they cannot alter. This is protected, so they can't write in it. What it does is bring the student information over and their pre and post percentage and their achievement level. Well, this table will tell us how many level 1s did you have for this skill, and what was their pre and post, and how they improved. So not only will it do it for the entire classroom, but it breaks it down to their achievement level descriptors based on the milestones. So we want to see that our level 1s at least move up to level 2, our level 2s move up to level 3. And this is great data analysis, because if we see some level 4s that drop back, there's a problem that we have to reteach again. And the graph will also show us the pre and post comparison. So we do want to see, and it's color coded blue and orange, it will be pre and post so that we can determine growth for each skill. So what do these pre and post assessments look like? Well, here's a sample. It's all multiple choice, 5 questions. They're not going to be some simple algorithmic problem. They're going to have to be word problems that contain that rigor of depth of knowledge level 2 or 3, so that they can actually extract the information that they need. And now, one thing I love about this particular standard is there's always not an answer that you have to calculate. Most of these, they have to set up the problem. So that's just this skill itself. So after they take this, that's on day 1, they'll see this again on day 10. So it's just a 10-day process, and the teachers don't have to do anything towards the creation because everything has been created. So after they do this on a Monday, on a Tuesday, they're going to get this PowerPoint. And this PowerPoint is an overview of that particular standard of solving multi-step word problems using number sentences. It gives the misconceptions, how to address the misconceptions, and also it gives the vocabulary. I didn't include that on it, but what we're going to see on the next slide is practice opportunity 1. There are 8 of them, but we always include the vocabulary on those. So here's one. So here's the academic vocabulary that addresses this standard. Well, we've taken the pre-assessment. Now, here's Tuesday, practice opportunity 1. The students aren't to do this by themselves. This is a graduate release, so we're going to do it the we do. Because, again, they took the pre. We want to make sure they understand how to set this problem up, how to solve it, and how to interpret it if there's a remainder and so forth. And then we move from this to practice opportunity 2. So on day 9, we'll have practice opportunity 8, and we're still doing it as a class. It should take 5 to 10 minutes to do each problem. And on that Friday, the 10th day, we actually do the post-assessment. So the whole thing about this is we're going to keep introducing or reintroducing those previously taught concepts that the students saw in August and September. They're going to see it again in January, February, March, and we're going to be able to spiral it in and make sure they retain that information. And again, this is like the 2nd or 3rd time they're seeing it, so that we can kind of intervene and provide any processes that we need to use, manipulatives, any hands-on activities that we can use just to make sure they be able to move from that concrete to abstract so that they can do well on the milestones. So that is it. We're looking at the data analysis, and we're looking at the long-term project of what we call the short cycle assessments. Are there any questions that you may have? Any comments? What do you think about it?
I think that it can definitely work because I think that exposure is the key for the scholars.
Right.
And I think that knowing what their areas of strength and weaknesses are, and being able to hone in and tailor your instruction to meet their needs.
Yes, yes. So one of the biggest things, and people have already said, research has shown that students, it's like summer learning loss. They have the summer learning loss where you lose a vast amount of information because you're not exposed to it over there. Well, it's the same thing that happened here, because in math, we jump from concept to concept. They're not always interrelated. If we go from, fractions to probability, it does, because to understand probability we need fractions, but sometimes we'll move from number and operations to geometry, and now it doesn't interconnect, so therefore we need to make sure, well, we're on geometry now, how do I make sure they still retain those standards from numbers and base 10? So it's going to be great that we spiral, and it's going to be done with fidelity, because I get to monitor the data analysis spreadsheets to make sure the teachers are putting in the pre and the post, and make sure the students are doing it. And this is just a small thing of what we're going to do as a school, but this is my long-term project with these short cycle assessments.
Awesome.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.